administrators. You have some excellent resources right there on campus. Not a lot of universities have that, so very, very pleased to not be alone in trying to describe the subtleties and also the details, the Young Investigator program from DoD. And it takes on many flavors, as you might imagine. So, Warren, I didn't see you. Are you there? Do you want to say hello and introduce yourself briefly before I start? Maybe he's not there, Christine. But anyway, we often work in tag team, and we've been working with UTSA for a couple of years now on various types of early career awards, including NSF Career. So we're pleased to be here. So let me see if I can start sharing the screen. I'm going to do a, let's hope this works. I've tried this before. And let's see. Let's see, here's one. Okay, I think I've got it. Different Zooms and Teams and various things. So let's see. Okay, I think that should be showing, and tell me if it is not. Okay.
I can see that.
You can. Okay, perfect. And I assume everyone else can. And so at any time, I kind of get focused on the presentation, and I do not tend to look at chats and things like that. So just feel free to, jump in and stop me if you have either a question or if I start to break up or you're not seeing the presentation. Okay. So I'm Rick Nader. I have, let me see if I can make this go forward. Many years of experience with both grants across the board from multiple agencies. Been both a senior research officer and an international officer, so I'm familiar also with some of the international collaborative elements of the federal agencies. So if you're interested in that, I'd love to have a conversation about how that can work. And also my colleague Warren Berggren, former provost, and also at our Research One, 41 plus years of continuous federal funding. I think we might have to update that now that it's 2021. But he's also a great resource. We have a couple more people on the GPS team that specialize in education and global health and things like that. So if you ever need any assistance in those areas, we're very pleased to help in that regard. What I'll do is kind of fly over 30,000.
I'm sorry to interrupt. I think you're sharing just the presentation. It's not in presentation mode. I'm sorry. I'm not. You may need to. I don't know. You may need to stop sharing and then share the screen that you have as the.
Okay, let's try that.
Presenting.
Thank you for telling me that. That happened last time too. So I'm not an expert in Teams. Let's see if this will work here. And it should, maybe I'll leave it on this level so that when I do put it in presentation mode, okay, I'll put it in presentation mode right now. Is it in presentation mode?
No, not yet.
No, I think Teams is different. You have to share the actual presentation mode screen. So you
okay. Open share tray. Sorry about this. I don't really know how to make it share.
Let me look into that.
Yeah, you probably just need to put it in presentation mode and then toggle. Are you on a Windows machine? Then just do
I see.
Control Tab and go back to Teams, and then then do the share. So you can.
Okay. Yeah, it's. I don't have any knowledge of how to do that.
Oh.
But what I can probably do is just leave it in the.
Yeah, maybe just enlarge your screen a little bit in just the regular view. The editing.
If I leave it there, I can probably go through it, right?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Well, try to be too fancy. Okay. So I'll just go from this screen, and then the appearing bullets won't appear, but they'll be all there at the same time. But anyway, that's not a big deal. We need to get through it quickly before we get to the panel. So I'm going to give the sort of 30,000 foot view, and then we're really going to give you some really great advice from our two panelists, Dr. Combs and Dr. Nash. Okay, so I'm going to go over the 3 branches plus DARPA and Navy and Marine Corps together, and I guess the reason to take them individually is that they really do act with their own culture and their own sort of set of eligibility criteria. You'll see they are a little bit different, and just to stress the importance of getting to know each of them and their particular scientific priorities, because they have different missions, as you can imagine, within DoD. So the ONR is one of the first, and they give often the most in the awards, up to 510,000 over 36 months. You know, they're really interested in the types of research that fit the ONR science technology specifications. And so I put a link in there so you can explore those if you haven't already, and to see where your area of research fits. One of the things I pulled off of their website is the contacting the division director, the program officer. I think that, you know, especially in ONR, they tend to be more of a long-term engagement for you. I mean, they don't stop at the young investigator. They tend to keep going and handle all of the different areas of basic and applied and development research, which is known as 6.1, 6.2, and 6.3. So just a little bit about that. Also, AFOSR, they have usually around 7 years. I think it's 7 to 8 years. They always publish by April of every year, so that it continues to have a different date for eligibility. But you need to check when the specific RFP is out. And they're looking also for the same thing, exceptional ability and promise in early career faculty, and they're looking for long-term relationships as well. So they try to capture the attention of early career researchers and then work with them over the course of their careers, of the faculty members' careers. They also have set priorities in their broad agency announcements, so it's very important to dig into that, similar to ONR, and find out what specific areas expertise and your interest, and then move quickly into a conversation with the program officers and share publications with them, and also meet them at conferences. It's a critical piece to get an award, but they give a little less, 3 years duration for about 150 per year. Okay, the Army Research Office is the external funding office. There's also the Army Research Lab, which is their intramural arm. And they also are looking for things which are a little bit broader mission. I mean, the Army covers a lot of bases. And so they are very interested in enabling new and improved operational capabilities and related technologies. All of these are restricted to U.S. citizens, U.S. nationals for young investigator programs. Some of the DoD agencies can fund internationally and also international non-U.S. citizens, but not in the Young Investigator Program. Their BAA is a 5-year BAA and going through March of 2022, so it's still relevant for this coming cycle. And they have a little bit less money, but nonetheless could be very catalytic to a long-term relationship. Okay, and then DARPA has its own. I'd love to hear the panel's thoughts on DARPA versus the others. Their young faculty award. Similarly constituted, they're looking for assistant but also associate professors within 3 years of their tenure appointment, and they are seeking to engage that faculty member with DARPA early on, especially if they're the faculty member is doing something of interest to DARPA. And their program officers have quite a lot of discretion, and often they find you. You may not know that they're watching you, but they're watching you in a good way to look for promising new areas of research that they can help shepherd and support for national security purposes. Okay, so a couple of just general rules. You'll probably hear these several times, but they're still golden. You know, the golden rule is whoever has the gold makes the rules, tongue in cheek. And that means the different agencies within the DoD have various types of rules, and I pulled one or two or three of them out of each of them, one of the branches that that would be relevant. And as I mentioned, the getting to know the program officer, you'll hear that a lot. They have broad degrees of discretion. When I was at NSF, AFOSR was close by, and we would go have lunch every once in a while with their program officers, and we swap stories. But they're really great scientists and engineers first, and also constantly on the lookout for new ideas and ways to maximize what they want to do for the agency mission. So anyway, as I mentioned before, ONR program managers, there's a website, check it out, find out who fits best with your area, and don't be shy once you have a really good, solid idea. Second, follow the directions. This is a very simplistic for AFOSR, but very relevant. They have a 3-step process. Is you have to look at the BAA. If you don't look at the BAA, you may be blind when you're talking to the program officer. So make sure you have your idea based on the needs listed in the BAA to start the conversation. Once you feel you've got that covered, you can put it into a short summary. I don't know if anybody's ever heard of the Hillmeyer Catechism, but that's a nice way to put things together. Is, you know, what is it? Why is it important? Why is it important now? You know, who benefits, who cares? I mean, these kinds of things, reflecting the mission of the agency you're submitting, and then submit something to the program officer in advance of that for discussion. And if they like it, they'll certainly let you know, and they'll continue to engage. Third rule, get to know the culture. Just as these agencies, every agency has its culture. Every agency is not even in the DC area. This one, the Army Research Office, is in North Carolina, and you know they talk about who they are a little bit more than others. And so you'll want to you know, realize through either reviewing some of their annual statements and some of their accomplishments and some of their media, you know, what kinds of things they're really looking for, and understand the culture of that agency. That's a quick look at some of the agencies, including DARPA, just to whet your appetite a bit. I'd like to give you these 4 points, and then we're going to move into our panel, who have direct experience with these grants. So that's where you'll get a lot of the great insights. Getting to know the reason they have this program. I mean, they want to get to know you early in your career and build a long-term relationship with you. You know, it may be not forever, but it might be at a certain point in your career and up to a certain point in your career where your research and their needs are very clearly aligned. And so there's important to understand that that's why they're after you in a way, and that's why you should be after them if there's a really good match. I also understand that these are mission critical R&D relationships. So anything you're doing that can really help the national defense is something they will continue to focus on. They can fund anywhere in the world, maybe not in the Young Investigator program, but over time, when you have international collaborations, or if there are other venues beyond Young Investigator program. There are regular calls all the time for different DoD, and once you're sort of in I won't call it a club, but I'll say it's you're known to the agency. That can be very, very fun diversification of the relationship for funding for you. But it all starts with you. You've got to get out there, and or they will find you at a conference, or they will approach you if they really like what you're doing. And you may not know that they were reading your publications, but in any way, it mostly starts with you. So attend the conferences. Don't be shy about your research interests, especially if they fit very, very closely with DoD's priorities. So with that in the rearview mirror, I'd love to start the panel. I can read all about Chris and Kelly to you, and why don't I do that, because they really are quite impressive with their background and have such great experience here. So Dr. Chris Combs is the D. Howard Endowed Assistant Professor in Aerodynamics at UTSA in Mechanical Engineering. And prior to UTSA, Dr. Combs worked as a research assistant professor at the University of Tennessee Space Institute. His primary research interested in the development and application of non-intrusive laser-based measurement techniques for compressible flows, and he has extensive experience in investigation of hypersonic flow physics. Over 50 technical publications in this field and 10 million in research funding from agencies such as NASA, United States Air Force, Navy, CPS Energy, and DARPA. He was recently recognized, and the reason he's here is he was a recipient of the Air Force Office of Scientific Research Young Investigator program, and in that he's also currently leading the construction of a Mach 7 wind tunnel. Can't imagine how fast that would be. Facility at UTSA that will be completed in the spring, and I guess if that's exactly this spring or next spring, he can tell us more about that. And our second distinguished panelist is Dr. Kelly Nash. She's a professor, and I hope this is still correct, the website Dean for Faculty Affairs, Associate Dean for Faculty Affairs. Correct me later if I have that wrong. Her areas of specialization are in biophotonics, nanobiointerfaces, nanoparticle synthesis and spectroscopy, and nanotransducers. She has her PhD in physics from UTSA, MS in applied physics from Michigan, and her group is developing and implementing nanoparticles for biophysical and medical applications. And the goal of her research group is to develop unique nanoparticles to serve as nanotransducers of electromagnetic energy, optical, magnetic, and electric, to impart spatial temporal control on biological systems. And there are some very interesting research topics as well. You can read more about her background, or she'll tell you more about that. And as you can see from both these backgrounds, how important those types of capabilities would be to national defense missions. So hopefully that was a sufficient kind of a broad overview, and I wondered if I will try to advance these slides so that you can see them, Chris and Kelly, for advice that you have. And I will, I don't know how to get to mute for myself here, I'll just be quiet. But anyway, if you'd like to, Dr. Combs, pick up and start off with your advice and any other thoughts you might like to add to the slide.
Yeah, thanks for the intro, Rick. And I think somebody's got their audio on. I can hear some echo. Okay, I think that's better. So thanks for the intro. I could talk about hypersonics and the wind tunnel all day, but we'll try and stay focused on the stuff that's going to be relevant to y'all getting funding in the YIP program. So I put this first bullet because it is the most important. Like DoD agencies, the program manager is so important, especially compared to like if you're used to applying to NSF and NIH, and some other agencies that have panel reviews and things. DoD doesn't work like that. Your program officer, they might send it out for reviews, but for example, I know with my ONR YIP, which I'm actually working on today, this will be my third crack at it. It's just the program manager that's going to read that, and he's not sending it to anybody else. It's just it's all about making him happy. And so you've got to kind of keep that in mind when you're putting this together. And I've got a couple other bullet points that relate to this. But in terms of getting that conversation started, for one, I mean, obviously you have to find the relevant people at your agencies, and that's particularly important at the Air Force and at ONR, where they have a lot of different programs with officers that, you know, are all the different topics are divided up and have a specific program officer. So for hypersonics, there's one person that manages all of that. DARPA works a little bit differently, and the NASA early career works differently in that they put out specific topics. And they can come from different program officers. And like DARPA, in my instance, for example, there's a handful of different people that work hypersonics. So it's not quite as linear, and those calls can come from anybody. So it works a little bit different. You kind of have to wait for the right topic to come out with NASA and DARPA, but with the Navy and with the Air Force and with the Army, the program managers are really at the center. And you kind of want to have an idea that you've worked on with them to get kind of collectively to give yourself the best shot. So what I would recommend was something that helped me a lot is a program manager at the Army actually gave me this research menu concept. And when these people don't know you and they don't know anything that you work on, instead of going ahead and writing, you know, a full bore white paper, what I would recommend is send them an email and try and set up a phone call well before the deadline, and, you know, introduce yourself in the text, but then attach a PDF that's like 1 or 2 pages long that has your 4 best ideas that are relevant to the program, and a paragraph and a figure with each idea. So they've got 4 things to look at that they can skim really fast right before the meeting, and you can kind of say, hey, I'm attaching this to sort of guide the conversation, give you a feel for things that I'm interested in. And then the hope is that one of those they kind of like, right? And then you can spend 30 minutes talking about that and talking about why they're interested in it. And the good program officers are actually going to kind of steer you in the right direction, because they want you to do well, and they want young people in their program that are successful and that are working on the things that they're passionate about and that fit into the program. So you want to, you know, hopefully they grab onto one of those ideas and they say, you know, this is cool, but I'd really like it if you took it this direction. And then suddenly you've got an idea for a proposal that you know the program officer likes, right? So that's what you're trying to get out of that. And don't try and force an idea on them, because if they decide they don't like an idea, it's not like there's a panel that's going to save you. If the program officer doesn't think it's worth funding, then they're never going to fund it. So listen and go after the stuff that they're interested in, and just really keep your audience in mind. And obviously also that, like we said, you have to tie it to the DoD and the agency mission. And also, unlike NSF, you know, there's not like a big educational outreach component really that doesn't get mentioned at all, aside from, hey, I'm going to fund PhD students and train them to be part of the DoD workforce, basically. But you're able to get, and you should get, a lot more technical. I think when you submit to an NSF panel, you've got people from different fields reading your stuff, and you kind of need to appeal to a broader audience. When you go to the DoD, if it's just your program manager, they're a technical expert, and they want to see that you've got the technical chops. So you need to make sure that you're really getting into the details of what you're going to do, because they're going to focus on that type of stuff. And for example, with my ONR YIP that I'm working on, the edits I've gotten back from my program officer, it's like journal paper edits, really. Like, it's that level of detail, like, hey, you know, this specific thing with this technique, or you need to reference this paper here, kind of things. So you can get very, very technical and very detailed in a way that you wouldn't with NSF. Also, you probably, if you can, look up their previous program reviews, or you can sometimes get that information if you know you've got a faculty mentor that's in that program. Find out all the other stuff that they're funding, and it'll tell you, you know, what's already being done. It'll tell you what the program officer is interested in, and it will give you a feel for maybe where there's some low-hanging fruit of things that are really relevant that maybe aren't being worked on. But also, maybe there's a reason nobody's working on it, and it's the program manager doesn't care about that thing. So you there can be a little bit of both. Sometimes it might be everybody's working on the same thing because that's what the program manager wants, and you just need to find a new wrinkle within that same subtopic. So, and then another piece of this is like, you really want to get to know your program officer and what they're interested in. You know, what did they work on in their PhD thesis? They're going to have pet projects that they really care about and that they get excited about, and listen to those sort of things. And if you're willing to kind of not hold on too tightly to any idea that's yours, so to speak, and you're willing to kind of move in a direction that the program manager is interested in, then that's going to help a lot. And then the last thing I would say is that a lot of times with these YIP programs, there's a bit of a queue. You maybe need to get in line, and there's people that will have been waiting their turn for a few years, because a lot of times each program only gets one of these each year. So you might need to submit a few times before it's actually your turn, and that also gives you a few years to kind of iterate with the officer. And so you kind of need to be patient. If it's your first time, it's not impossible to get it, but it's a lot less likely. Thankfully, there's not a limit on these in the same way that there is with career submissions. You can keep submitting as long as you're eligible and as many times as you're eligible. But it's just, yeah, you might need to wait. But also, you know, it gives you time to kind of continue to refine that proposal. So get the feedback from the program manager after you get rejected. You know, call them, get them on the phone directly, because they'll tell you a lot more over the phone than they would just on an email. And they probably, like I said, since they don't send it to a panel, they're not going to have a panel review. So they're just going to have comments, maybe even off the cuff. And so just take notes and write down what they say. And then next year when you're writing the proposal, make sure you address that stuff. But you'll get more unfiltered info if you can just get them on the phone, right? And then I think I kind of said this already, but the one other point I would bring up is that ONR, Navy, so the Navy, the Air Force, and the Army are much more open-ended, and you've got a little bit more freedom to kind of pursue, a form of an idea that you come up with, whereas DARPA and NASA are going to have more specific ideas that they want you to go after. But also, there is a comment about strings being attached. If there's strings anywhere, I would think it's NASA and DARPA. In my experience working with them, they're a lot more hands-on. ONR, the core DoD branches, Army, Navy, Air Force, are, you might not hear from your program manager much while you're working. And it depends on the program officer, but they might not be particularly involved. NASA and DARPA are going to be talking to you a whole lot more and demanding pretty regular reports and things, especially NASA. They want updates all the time. So NASA gets very connected. So just be prepared for that if you end up working with them. So I'll give Kelly some time to talk to, and I don't know, Rick, if we're doing questions now or if we're holding them all to the end. So that's kind of
well, that's really helpful, Chris. Thank you. And maybe we should do questions now, and that, like any good review, we don't have to repeat the same things later, but then we can entertain new things as well. Any questions? How about anything Dr. Combs shared? Feel free to come off mute. And since I'm not a master at Teams, I may get Christina to help me moderate here, but you can put your hand up or you can come off mute and ask a question. Any questions there from the audience?
I am not seeing any.
Okay, well, I did have one. So if I could ask mine, then we can go to Dr. Nash as well. So you mentioned one per program. So is that, so for every program line in the BAA, which has an assigned program officer, that means one young investigator per is allowed, or is that what you said?
That's generally what they get. And sometimes, I would recommend people go back and look at the announcements when these got awarded last cycle. And if you go through, you're going to see for every program, there's usually just one person. And look at the people that have been recently funded in your most relevant program. You should be able to pick those out pretty fast. So yeah, the numbers usually work out where there's about one YIP award per program, which is, it's like 30 or so per agency. So, and the program officers, they take their, the ones that they like, and they go and fight for them at the agency level. And they generally are expected to get one. I know that sometimes maybe they get lucky and they get two, but I also know it's possible that there are years where they don't get any, although that would politically, cause some heartburn. So I think that doesn't happen quite as often. And it's the same way with the DURUP program too. So yeah, I would and that's another thing to keep in mind. Like, you should probably be familiar in your field with like who are the other people at your level that are eligible for a YIP that haven't won one yet. And you probably know who your competition is. But if there's somebody that's about to go up for tenure that hasn't gotten a YIP that really needs one, but they're good, the program officer knows that. And that's going to be a consideration, is like, I don't want this person to not get tenure. And this is their last chance to win a YIP. So that they think about stuff like that. So it can kind of help you understand where you stand in the pecking order too, even if you've got a great idea.
Okay, that's really helpful. Thank you. Perfect. Okay, well, if there are other questions related to these comments, we'll address them after we get to Dr. Nash's. And she was, at the time, I think it was I asked her generally and she answered very generally. So I'm sure there's a lot more detail there. But Dr. Nash, did you want to describe these or other things that would? Yes, please.
Yeah, I'll add a bit more. I mean, I think, so I think what everyone, and thank you, Chris, for your comments and the details you provided, because, I think it's very similar advice. I'll pick out a couple of other nuances, and it's good to know, at least, Chris, that I received my YIP some 7 or 8 years ago. So this has not changed, right? I think the best advice, a couple of pieces of advice I'd like to expand on or add to Chris's, I think the program officers do have a great say in what they want to see funded. And so, you want to know the program officer, but also I'm just going to tell folks, get to know the researchers in the DoD labs, look at who has been funded, as Chris has mentioned, who was funded particularly in the last 2 years of the program. As a YIP awardee, by the time I got into my second year, I actually was reviewing that. My program officer would send me YIP proposals to actually review. So sometimes those YIP awardees are the program manager may seek some advice from them. And the reason is, there are, the program manager has laid out in the BAA a description of what they're looking for, right? And what's, what kind of new science they're trying to pull out in their program, right? And to discover in their program. And so the program managers will heavily seek advice from the researchers in the labs, as well as their current awardees, to kind of help figure out what pieces do we need, what other research do we need to kind of help complete the picture of the science that we're trying to achieve in the portfolio. So, I would say that is an important aspect. And at least if you have an opportunity, like Chris said, their program reviews, I think the Air Force is probably better than the other agencies at sharing when their program reviews are. Cultivate that relationship with the program officer, because I can think of my first time of interacting with the Air Force was I was invited to a program review to give a talk. And little did I know I was in a room full of YIP awardees and lab folks. And when I had presented my work, they obviously I wasn't a funded person at that time, but they escorted all of us who were not funded at the time out the room, and there was a big meeting about all of those talks. And I can say it was about 8 of us that gave talks, and the next year 3 of us had funding in the portfolio. So this really is about building relationships. And so I've heard often from many program officers in the Air Force, at least from their side, they take pride in funding folks who are early in their career, who have novel ideas, those ideas that you want to actually push the science that NSF may not fund. The DoD loves to fund that kind of things. And I know the Air Force has like a running list of folks that ultimately got, Nobel Prizes that they funded when NSF wouldn't fund, right? So I would say don't be shy about, your ideas. And at the same time, you need to make sure you tie those ideas to the mission of the agency. And I know sometimes we, as scientists, we have great ideas. We get very much kind of stuck in where we think an idea will lead us in terms of scientific outcomes. But a program manager may be viewing it very differently from how it supports their mission. And so I often advise some of our faculty that are just writing, normal proposals to the DoD enterprise, make sure it's clear in your proposal how your work that you're proposing is going to advance the mission of the DoD, right? And I think, other pieces, definitely I used to, track down the lab researchers in the DoD. That's how I really got involved, particularly around the Air Force. One of the major conferences that I go to just for my discipline, which is SPIE, I would just go sit in the sessions because I knew the Air Force is heavily involved in biophotonics. And so I would just go to all of their sessions and actually just see what the researchers are doing. And that really helped me figure out what's the gap, what could I bring to what the science that they're already doing within the DoD. I think the other piece of advice, I like what Chris said about the multiple pieces. Multiple ideas that you do bring to the program manager. That for me, I did that as well. I think I must have pitched about 4 or 5 different ideas to the program manager. And a lot of people, some people don't realize, I actually received 2 Air Force awards in the same year. One was from the YIPS, and then I received the second award through a joint funding through 2 different programs. Because my program manager read it and shared it with other program officers, and ultimately I got funded for 2 programs in the same year. So it's worth the effort to go ahead and write out all of those ideas that you think can tie it to the DoD mission. And I'll stop there so we can take some questions, right?
Okay, thank you, Dr. Nash. And are there questions?
There was one. Is there any way to find relevant programs for us easier? Also for NIH, can we find how much they have funded each area of research? How about DoD? Is there any way to find those numbers? And Dr. Combs did provide a bit of an answer. Does that meet your needs?
So I think, the funding question sometimes for these things haven't had just a regular DoD grant, and I know Chris has had some funding as well outside of the YIPS award. That's a conversation with the program manager. When I got my secondary awards and subsequently other funding, the DoD manager, program officer will often tell you, like, I can fund you. I have this much basically in my budget. So I think everybody has to remember this funding is tied to the Department of Defense, the entire funding budget of the Department of Defense. And in that budget line, those like billions of dollars, all right, a certain part is for research within the DoD enterprise. And I think I track this regularly. I think it's grown pretty much about 2 to 5% each year in the last 5 or 6 years. So, that the program managers are planning out based off of who they know is their funding and who is rolling off of funding. DoD program managers are very good at, if they see their funding is rolling off, for you in particular, and you're in an area that they may be, changing the direction of their program, they will connect you with other folks. And so I'll give an example. Very much my work was biophysics fundamental research, but they connected me with NIH and NSF program officers to give me a soft landing, right, out of the program as it was changing. So, those conversations about funding are very, is very important to talk to the program officer, because they'll let you know those figures of merit in terms of funding.
That was very, very interesting. Yeah, the relationships among the within AFOSR, the other program managers in the agencies, and even with the handoff, that explains some of the lunches I was at. Oh well, we have these great PIs we're funding. There's a question in the chat from Dr. Gao. If managers do not respond to email, does it mean they're not interested? What to do?
Yeah, I mean, I will, Chris, and maybe I can, but one thing I will say for the group here, for everyone, we are a minority servant institution. So it's not that the program manager is ignoring you. Sometimes they're getting so many requests. And I think I've connected a few researchers on this campus to go email the minority servant program officer for the Army, Air Force, or Navy. And they're often right in the same building. They'll go knock on the door and say, hey, I have an investigator at a minority servant institution that's trying to reach you. So don't be shy about doing that as well. If it's, reach out to the program manager officer first. But if you're not getting a response, sometimes they're just super busy. So also consider that as an option to getting a foot in the door in the DoD.
Yeah, some program officers are really bad at email. Some are not. It depends. And so it could mean that they don't like your idea, but I would recommend, if they don't respond, to continue to follow up, but very politely, of course, and give them a few weeks or a month before you bug them again. Actually, there were a couple of really good points that Kelly made that I wanted to expand on a bit. One, a comment that Kelly was just making about, getting secondary funding. So like, after you get a YIP, it's a really great time to apply for a DURP. So like the Defense Instrumentation Program, because like with the YIP, the program officers probably only get one DURP, maybe two per year. There's also a bit of a line, but they're not going to give you a DURP if you're not funded in their program already. They want to give the DURPs to people that are performing for them already to help make their research even better. And so if you, once you get the YIP, then start writing the DURP proposals, because you'll have a lot better shot at getting it. Obviously, it should be something that enhances the research that you're already doing in the program. And then kind of like Kelly was saying, between the ideas that hopefully you're pitching multiple ideas, between those and like maybe getting another look or getting funded separately, now you've got a regular reason to connect with the program officer, and you're giving them updates, and you should be in touch with them. Kind of, if they're not initiating it, you should. But now every time I talk to my program officer at the Air Force, for example, she's making comments like, oh gosh, I really wish somebody would work on this, or I'd really be interested to see somebody look more into this thing. And then it's like, okay, well, I know what my next proposal is going to be, because they're just giving you the ideas. So there's a lot of stuff like that goes on once you start talking to these people. And then also kind of jumping off of what Kelly was saying about how program officers reach out to previous YIP winners, which totally happens. Also, just more in general, they're going to talk to the other senior people that are funded in the program. They're going to talk to your PhD and postdoc advisor, because they're probably funded in the program. So for better or worse, in NSF, they're not really supposed to do this, but in DoD, your reputation definitely matters in a lot of ways. And I know, for example, my PhD advisor with another one of his former students that's a faculty member, I know that the Air Force program officer called him up and was just like, is this guy any good? Like, are they going to do good research if I fund them? And so there's conversations like that happen where they're going to reach out to people that know you or other people in the area, and they're going to kind of lean on them for expertise about both, you know, your ability and expertise, and like, does your idea actually make sense and will it work? So part of the moral of that is make sure you're not making a bunch of people angry, because there's a chance that your program officer asks them if they should fund you or not, in kind of a more informal way that's not even a review, so to speak. So, and then I also saw a question, two questions for preliminary results, like it doesn't hurt, but it's not required. It can help make your proposal a lot stronger. So it's not a bad idea if you can get it, but I wouldn't necessarily skip a cycle, because there's no harm in applying and like getting in line, so to speak. And I would apply for the YIP before just applying to the core program, but know that because it's just less competitive, but also, and a lot of the program resources are maybe already committed, but there's also always a possibility, and something you can ask your program manager if your idea doesn't get funded after a proposal. They might have, maybe they have like 25K left over in their budget that isn't going to roll over. And you might say, hey, could I just get a little seed funding to get some preliminary data for next year? Sometimes they can do stuff like that. But also they can just, if they like your YIP idea, but you couldn't get the YIP slot, sometimes they can fund you through the core program. So those are conversations you should have with the program manager, but I would go for the YIP first.
It's a great responses. Thank you both. So I guess I had one other question that might stimulate a little more another sophisticated view of the differences really between sort of the NSF as the primary contrast and the DoD YIP program. And you know, how do the young investigator programs handle the interdisciplinarity issue, or you know, is there a way, you know, for a faculty member to know how well they already fit with something that might say in the BAA is a priority? I mean, what's both the interdisciplinary question, how do they handle it, and also, you know, how does a faculty member know if an email that doesn't get responded to means they don't care, or they care, but they just haven't had time to get back to you and your idea? You know, I mean, I know they're all important, but you know, how do you know as a faculty member, you know, which bucket you're in?
I mean, maybe I can reply to that question, or at least start us off. I mean, I would say between the two programs, there's not any difference, particularly in the level of engagement that you have with the program officer. You know, NSF career awards are very similar, right? There are very few NSF career awards. And so the program managers are taking the same, you know, risk that a DoD program officer would be taking on you. You know, the difference in the type of award, like as in writing up the proposal, as Chris mentioned, is with YIP, you don't have this you know, your broader impacts are basically replaced by, you know, tying your research and justifying how you fit within the DoD mission, right? So, I mean, there's differences in the structure, but, you know, how you engage with the program officers are very, very similar. And, you know, just back to my comment earlier, I think there's an advantage, right, with us being at UTSA, that you do also have this secondary person who is the minority serving program officer, who is there that can help to make connections for you. So I think, Rick, you know, something for the audience here is, even if you're new to the DoD and you have no idea how you fit in, and that, I think there was a question about how do you go through that all of those BAAs to figure out the program. That's probably a good resource if you have never engaged with the DoD is to reach out to that program, the minority serving program officer, because that person could potentially help to provide you with some introduction to some of the program officers.
Yeah, I agree, and I would add on in response to that question that, you know, for one, I don't think if you're trying to decide like which program to apply to or what type of topic to write, because you can only do one YIP per agency, one proposal each year. I think you got to try and get in touch with, if there's multiple programs you think you fit into, then you got to get in touch with multiple program officers and you see how those conversations go. And the one that you feel the best about is the one you have to go for. And that's kind of going to be a personal thing, but you're going to have to pick where you think you've got the best shot and go for that. Because there's like, I could go into the combustion program too, and I've got a little piece in there, but I knew that that wasn't my best shot for the YIP, so I didn't go that route. In terms of program officers not responding, I mean, I think, you know, you need to be reasonably persistent and like follow up once a month or so if they're not responding. I do think if you're sending multiple ideas and like in a menu type thing instead of here's a white paper, you've probably got a better chance, because if it's just a white paper and it's one idea that they don't like, then they're maybe less likely to respond. You might, I'm not sure how you're approaching if you're not getting a response, but you might just say, hey, can we just talk on the phone? And kind of just to get a conversation and a dialogue started. But then, and this is harder now because with COVID and everything, but I think normally what you would do is you try and hunt these people down at a conference, right? And you should know what conferences they're going to go to, because they go to the conferences because they want to see all the people in their program presenting their work. So that's the other thing is like, if you just can't get a response, just wait for that in-person conference, which hopefully starts happening in the next calendar year. And you got to track them down there and get a meeting. I would recommend sending an email ahead of time saying like, hey, can we meet up at this conference? But then if they don't respond to that, then still you might try and pull them aside and start a conversation if you can, just to introduce yourself and see where that goes. The one other thing is you might kind of get some advice or run it past some mentors you have in your network that are already funded by this agency or in that program, and be like, hey, I've been emailing the program officer so-and-so, and I just can't get a response. I know you're in the program. Do you know what's going on? And that can maybe, they might tell you, you know, oh, they never respond to emails, or, oh, I might mention it next time we talk and like bring your name up. So you can do stuff like that too, and use people that you know that are funded to kind of help you get in the door as well.
I'll mention one other thing, Rick, and yeah, great points, Chris. There's, you know, there's also a contractor to the DoD that has an event called Taking the Pentagon to the People. I don't know, Chris, if you've ever attended one of these sessions.
No, I haven't. That's a good idea, though.
Yeah, there's, again, this is something that's targeted. The DoD has historically recognized that they haven't done as much outreach to minority serving institutions. And I know I keep harping on our status, but it puts us in a unique opportunity that we probably should have, you know, more people engaged in the DoD within UTSA, just because of that status. And so there's a contractor to the DoD that hosts these events almost annually. They're doing a virtual one that's coming up. But we hosted one quite a few years ago at UTSA, maybe about 6 years ago or so. But basically, they bring people from across the whole DoD enterprise to engage with researchers, the research enterprise at the institution, as well as students, because the DoD is also interested in getting more students in their workforce. And so these events for the last 2 years have been virtual. So that's a great opportunity. I'll put a link to it. I just saw it yesterday. I got an email yesterday from the contractor saying that they were, there's one coming up, I think, in the spring, but sometimes it actually may be twice a year, I'm sorry, that they actually do this event. So I'll put the information in the chat.
Yeah, and you're totally right, Kelly. And I know in particular, I've gotten on like a Navy mailing list where they have a bunch of HBCU, MSI events to connect you with program officers or let you know about, how to pursue funding. So that's a great point is, taking advantage of that since we're at UTSA is helpful because there are a wide variety of events like that where you can meet people in those types of forums.
Great advice. I only had one other question from my perspective. I think you covered so many good details with some of the general questions I had asked earlier. And how do you know Army, Air Force, Marines? I mean, how do you know who to look at first? And especially if the BAAs have overlapping priorities, and is there sort of a method there, or you just have to kind of pick
all of them, man?
All of them.
Yeah, you go for every agency that you can. So within a given agency, you can only submit one, but you should definitely submit these different young investigator programs. Like you need to make sure every year you have a proposal in AFOSR, in ONR, in Army, and then if there's a DARPA topic that makes sense, submit that. If there's a NASA topic that makes sense, submit that or whatever. So yeah, don't limit yourself to like one of these agencies. Go after every single one, and that's a lot of proposals to write. But it's like, you're trying to get tenure. So
yes, it's throwing spaghetti at the wall. So
exactly, yeah.
I was really encouraged to hear that program officers actually understand the circumstances of the YIP potential faculty awardees, and they really do serve as mentors in many ways. It sounds like from your experiences.
Yeah, it's like intimidating at first, but then you get to know them and they're just normal people too. And like in my experience, most of them are pretty friendly and they like to talk to young faculty. And they, like Kelly said, they want to support the young faculty because they know that if they only fund full professors, then pretty soon they're not going to have anybody working in their area.
That's very true.
Yeah, and I would say that's probably the difference between NIH and something like the Air Force. Is you don't really, or the DoD, you really don't have to have this well-established track record. And to the question earlier, how much preliminary data, have a great idea and think that you can, convince the program manager you can solve their problems, right, in their program. That's
fantastic. And they don't wear their uniforms even if they earn the rank in their program officer jobs at all. So you're not don't have that image in your mind of who's on the other end of the phone call.
Yeah.
Nobody in uniform.
One other general piece of advice I'd give is to, when talking to program officers, really use it, you want to sell yourself, but use it as an opportunity to, as it should be fact finding and intel gathering. So get the program officer talking as much as you can and listen and get them to give you as much as you can. Because I know that some people, the instinct is to go into those meetings with like a giant slide deck and spend the whole time just like talking about all your stuff and all these ideas. And if the program officer doesn't care, like then you just wasted your time. So try and get them to tell you about what they're interested in and what they care about and what they like working on. And that's going to be a lot more valuable sometimes than you just sharing a bunch of your own ideas. And kind of let them latch on to the things that they're excited about and just go with that.
Good point. Dr. Nash, anything further to add? Or I don't know how much time everybody has, but I love this topic, so I'll stay on as long as people would like.
Yeah, I don't have anything else, but I'm actually putting the correct link, it looks like, to the event website, because I think that took you to that previous link was to the contractor's webpage, but I'll put the link to the Taking the Pentagon to the people.
Okay, we'll keep this open long enough for that to be sure people can click on that. Any other thoughts or questions from the audience, or Christina, if you see anything in the chat that I don't see?
Nothing yet, but definitely questions are welcome.
Oh, while we're here, one other thing I'll throw out there that a lot of people aren't familiar with, or just some lingo, is to be familiar with the difference between like 6.1 versus 6.2 versus 6.3 funding. And I think that was in one of your slides that mentioned at least. But the YIP awards are all going to be 6.1 research, which is a reference to the budget line in the budget document for basic research. So it needs to be attached to the DoD mission, but it can't be something that's going to get slapped with ITAR or become sensitive. So it still needs to be kind of like low TRL type stuff. 6.2 is more applied, and DoD definitely funds that type of stuff. But 6.2 is applied research, and that's not going to be YIP funded. So you kind of want to toe the line between something that's relevant to the DoD, but it's also still basic science. And then 6.3 is higher up the chain in terms of like application level type stuff. So anyway, it's the type of thing that will come up with the program officer. So just if you hear that, it's good to know what they're talking about.
Great. Yeah, I think that's a good point, Chris, because I mean what I've seen is a lot of the applied research, and then the 6.3 is internal folks to the labs, as well as by the time you may have done some basic research and you're ready to translate it. So doing the SBIRs through the DoD. Yeah,
because even 6.2, they're going to be a little bit wary sometimes. The university's working on it because they're going to be cautious about international involvement. But especially 6.3, yeah, like that's kind of, I don't see a lot of that at university level. I don't know about you.
No, I think they're all mostly through SBIR engagements.
Right. Yeah.
I've done one proposal that wasn't funded, but that's okay.
Yeah.
You don't miss
also,
many,
the
but
money
that's
is bigger. The money's bigger the farther up you go. There's, the 6.2 contracts are big. The 6.3 contracts are really big. But yeah, like Kelly said, those are hard to get, especially at universities, unless you're maybe a sub.
Mm-hmm.
And that actually brings up a very good point about UTSA's research infrastructure support administration for anything that is sort of, downstream or, if Christina or Dan, if you had any assistance with faculty there, you might mention who to contact.
Let me look into that.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know of any direct contacts. I would say reach out to the RSC, but I mean, actually, Kelly or Chris might know who they've worked with who's really got good knowledge of DoD over there.
For what specifically? For like ITAR stuff or for just pre-award admin?
I think ITAR, export control, other types of.
Nikki Stevenson is the first person I usually talk to.
Okay.
Yeah, I think there's one question. I think Wade has a question about who can help prepare YIP with the YIP proposals. Oh, is that what your question was? Okay. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I mean, we have, I wouldn't say, yeah, go ahead, Dan.
Yeah, I was just going to weigh in that we offer extensive support for NSF career applications, but we're also more than happy to provide that same support for, DOE early career, Department of Defense early career, any of the prestigious, NIH has the Outstanding New Environmental Scientist program. So just reach out to me directly or through your grant development coordinator in your college. We're happy to help. We'll hire an external consultant for you. We'll give you external or internal support. Really, whatever you need. If you need to travel, just let me know. I've got a little bit of money.
I would also add, Way, that for anybody looking to do YIP, sending it out to eyeballs of people that are in that program before you submit it is a really good idea, especially the first time. So if you've got anybody in your network that's already funded in that program, I would send them the proposal and say, hey, can you take a look? But hopefully the idea has already been socialized with the program manager and kind of gotten their blessing before you go to the trouble of writing the proposal. Because if you haven't done that yet, it's going to be a bit DOA.
Yeah, I would add that same point is that the reason you don't see a lot of need for proposal consultations, except for maybe just editing clarity, other things like that, is because of that relationship building and the expectations there. So yeah, anyway, I agree with that.
And I think, and maybe Dan and I don't know, Chris, I mean, I just heard from one of our other faculty members in physics, they didn't get a YIP, but they got another DoD grant. And so, I mean, what was great, I mean, he ran the proposal just by me, just to look at it from my DoD lens. So I'm happy, Dan, when I have time to help look at some of these and provide feedback. Chris, I don't know, because we don't have a whole lot of DoD like basic research folks funded on campus, but I'm happy to do that.
Harry Millwater is a really good one.
Yeah, Harry Millwater is good. So he's probably
and I'm happy to look at people's proposals briefly if they want to send them to me, or like send you ones that I've written. And this is also along the lines of a comment somebody made about the core program. At least in the programs I'm in, I think the proposals to the core are more or less a formality. Like, I think those get won at the white paper stage. And if you get invited to write a full proposal to the core program, then it's probably going to get funded. So if you're just writing proposals to the core without the blessing of the PM, it's like got no chance, because the majority of that, it's either going to be them renewing people that are already funded, or it'll be ideas that they've fed to people that are already in the program, or like things that they've socialized one way or another, or just like said, hey, I want you to go work on this. So I think it's very, very rare in my experience that somebody just writes a proposal to the core program and it gets funded without a whole lot of, pre-work with the program manager.
Yeah, and I think that's what I probably meant, Chris. Like, so I think I've reviewed a lot of white papers for folks. Like, it's like at the white paper stage, so that when it hit the program manager's desk, it was kind of really clearly helped them really clearly articulate the mission part, right? How it ties to the mission, versus it being more like NSF style.
Right.
Mm-hmm. And those are short, so I don't mind reading short proposals.
Yeah, right.
I don't want to read the full thing.
Exactly.
No, I shouldn't.
You'll make a great program manager too if you decide to do that. If you don't want to read a long paper, that's what they love. So, any other thoughts, questions, or comments from anyone? I've learned tons of things I didn't know about YIPS, so I'm sort of happy to have been able to be moderator and benefit as well. Thank you to our panelists. Thank you, Chris, Kelly. Thanks, Christina and Dan. Any wrap-up remarks from Christina or Dan?
Thank you so much for joining us today. Be sure to look out for future events like this. I will be sending a registration link afterwards. And with that, I will also be sending a recording of this presentation to everyone. Well, thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Rick, thank you. Great job. Nice meeting you.
No, nice to meet you both. Thank you.
And nice to meet you all. Hope everybody got something out of it.
Oh, yeah. Thanks. Okay. Bye, guys.